Let me start by explaining what gamification is. Gamification is a use of ideas from game design, like points and badges and missions and quests and levels for non-game purposes. So it's really simple. So if you've got an Apple Watch or a Fitbit, or if you've used Duolingo, or you've heard of Peloton, or all these different things, then you will probably know about gamification. You know, you've been given points to fly more, or maybe you've got health insurance that gives you points to go and level up and reduce your premium. What I want to talk about is how gamification has really become so popular in the last 15 years. My background is as a game designer. Like, I made a game called Zombies Run, which is gamification as well. Basically, we try and make exercise more exciting, because when I started trying to run, I found it really boring and painful. And so we tried to turn running into a kind of post-apocalyptic adventure where you have to run from zombies in the real world, like using your legs, not on your couch, to survive. And we've got this audio adventure game. And when you get back, then you collect supplies and you can build up your base in our game. And we recently released a game this month with Marvel called Marvel Move, where you can run, walk, and jog with Marvel superheroes to go and get fit. So that's what I've been trying to do in gamification. Of course, this is not the only kind of gamification that's out there. If you've heard of Peloton, this is something that's really heavily gamified. If you're cycling on these exercise bikes, then you'll always see your score, effectively, on the right-hand side, and you're compared at all times to a live leaderboard of everyone else doing the workout at the same time. So you've got people who are really motivated to try and cycle faster and harder and longer to beat everyone else. This is me. I got a Peloton during the pandemic, like lots of other people. You can see my achievements. You can see my badges there. I sold it a few months later because it's pretty boring. But Peloton also has added more gamification in terms of this lane break game, and they try and make cycling a bit more exciting through this video game. Of course, a lot of people will know about gamification through Duolingo. This is a language learning app. It's a free app where it tries and encourages you to study more vocabulary and learn more words through levels and through quests and through missions. You can see on the left, if you complete this level, then you'll get 10 experience points. Maybe this all seems like really normal, but none of this actually existed like 15 years ago. You didn't get experience points or levels when you were using these apps. This all started pretty recently. This is a game called Rocksmith Plus by Ubisoft, and it's a way to learn the guitar. So you might have seen video games like Rock Band and Guitar Hero in arcades before, with just like plastic, controllers. This actually is about the real guitar, so you are actually learning how to play a real guitar. You use an actual guitar, and it will listen to the sounds you're making, and it will try and make that a bit more exciting. You can see in this Rocksmith Plus, you can go and level up, you can get points if you do better. And maybe it makes learning the guitar a little bit more interesting because you have to keep on practicing all the time. This app, Foursquare, is one of the first examples of gamification. The term gamification is only about 15 years old. People weren't really using it until about 2008, 2009. And Foursquare was one of the first apps to use it. And I use Foursquare a lot. I was kind of an obsessive user of it. What you would do is you would go to a bar or a university or a restaurant, and you would check in using GPS and the internet. And the more times you checked in, you would become the mayor of that location. And at first, you could get like free drinks or free food if you did that. But then it just became like a game. It just like, who could go to this bar the most, and could you go and beat your friends? And it was pretty harmless. You would get these like badges. It didn't really mean anything. But then it sort of has turned into something very different now. So this is a TikTok from 2 years ago from inside an Amazon warehouse. You can see that someone said, basically, as they pack more boxes in an Amazon warehouse, then they can earn points and become a game master or make history by working harder in the Amazon warehouse. So this is gamification of the workplace. That's one example. Here's another example from last year. So this is a game called Tamazilla. It's a real thing at Amazon. And so you're packing boxes every day. And by packing boxes or by picking things off shelves, you level up your virtual pets, a bit like Pokemon Go or Minecraft. Yeah, you know, this person wants to quit Amazon, but they don't want to abandon their virtual pets. Obviously, Amazon thinks, well, this is a great way to try and make our job more interesting. And maybe it makes it more fun for people, although I think that, well, we'll get into it. I'm not sure whether most people here would think that playing this game would make the job really that much more interesting. And so it becomes a little bit dystopian, like Black Mirror, if you've seen that, playing these games in the workplace. And of course, you don't have a lot of choice. It's not like you can turn that screen to the TV. You can't watch Netflix. You just got to play this game or nothing at all. I want to talk about like how this happened. How did we go from something that was just like for fun, for checking in at bars and like, you know, showing off to your friends, to a point where Amazon is trying to get you to work harder in a warehouse by getting you to collect virtual pets. So one reason is really simple. Gamification requires data. It requires information about what you're doing. And so now that we all have smartphones, we all have watches, we all have sensors, we have internet everywhere, we've got 5G everywhere, Wi-Fi, it's just much easier to get the data and get the information about someone and gamify that. From a technical point of view, it's really easy to do gamification. You just kind of like count what people are doing and you add points to that and you add achievements to that. So that's one reason why we're seeing so much more gamification now than it was in the past. But I think another reason is just how we think about games. You know, I'm old enough to remember in the UK, when I was growing up, you'd see these headlines a lot. So when Grand Theft Auto came out, you know, or Mortal Kombat, or Doom, or whatever, people would say, you know, ban these games. Violent video games turns, you know, people into killers. This person killed someone else because of PlayStation, all these things, right? And just to be clear, there's like no evidence that video games makes people more violent, right? There never really has been. A lot of people who play games and who make games, unsurprisingly, are pretty unhappy about seeing their hobby, about seeing their work described as something that can, you know, cause people to murder. And so there's been a kind of backlash to this where in the 90s and 2000s, everyone thought games were bad for you. And now, in 2020, 2023, video games are good for you, right? If you go and look at the research that's being done on video games, a lot of the conclusions coming out that video games, all video games apparently, are good for your well-being. They can make you smarter, or they can connect you with friends, and all these other things. If you were playing a lot of video games during the pandemic, during lockdowns, I played a lot of Animal Crossing, you know, with friends. It was a good way to connect to people. But it's such a weird thing to say video games are good for you. It's like saying TV is good for you. Like, what does that mean? Like, some TV is probably good for you, and some TV is probably bad for you. Some books are good for you, and some books are bad for you. It's a very weird thing to say video games are good for you or bad for you. But that's where we are now. People say games are good, and so they think, well, with gamification, taking ideas from video games and using them for other purposes is also good. You know, it's a kind of flattening of the argument. Things are much more complicated than that. And one of the side effects is that we have a lot of gamification that pretends to do things that it can't. Some of the most popular gamification out there is brain training apps. I used to be a neuroscientist, experimental psychologist, and I see a lot of apps that say, if you go and play our games, you'll get smarter, right? You'll increase your IQ, and you won't, you know, you can stave off cognitive decline, you'll be smarter. And this app, Lumosity, basically said, if you play our game, you know, you won't get dementia. And they got fined $50 million for basically lying about it, but they didn't have $50 million, so they only paid $2 million. And yet, it still happens. You know, this is my Apple Watch now. You know, it said basically go and get as many exercise minutes as you can this month. So you should go and exercise more this month than you did last month. That's what gamification is doing to my health. And so
I can never exercise less. It always wants me to exercise more. And if you think about where that goes, eventually you just injure yourself. So if that's where it ended, that would be okay, right? Because you can just choose not to have an Apple Watch. You can turn this off. You can not go and get a brain training app. You can just choose not to do all these things. But the thing that I find more worrying is what I call coercive gamification. So I showed you a video from Amazon where if you work at Amazon, then you kind of have to play this game. There's other examples of gamification in the workplace, or in schools, or even in government, where you have no choice. You just have to play the game if you just want to be there. So Uber, for example, if you know anyone who drives for Uber, if you talk to Uber drivers around the world, they might tell you about this thing called quests. And they keep on changing this, but the idea is kind of at like the start of a week, an Uber driver is offered these quests that they can select. And if they go and meet the trip requirement of a quest, then they get a bonus. And they're really pushed to doing this, right? And you might think, well, this is good. I mean, what's so bad about that? Uber's giving people more money. So I talked to some Uber drivers about this. I said, like, do you like it? I mean, do you like getting these quests? Do you like this gamification? And this guy was like, no, I don't like it, because it just feels like it's making me drive more than I wanted to. I didn't want to do 40 trips, but it keeps on telling me to do it, and I kind of need the money. One way of thinking about gamification and money is maybe it's a bonus, but another way is thinking it's a way to control people's pay. Obviously, we've seen Amazon's warehouse. This is another game from one of their warehouses. Basically, as you pack boxes there, then your dragon, you have a virtual dragon that moves faster, and you can compete against all the other people on your floor or other people around the world at Amazon. I mean, you don't get anything. It's just that you get more points. You get more points also if you come back from break, from the toilet quickly, from lunch quickly. You know, they're kind of checking because they are monitoring like how fast you are doing things down to the second. So you are wearing these handheld computers. So it's not just like, you know, a game you get to opt into. It's something that's watching you all the time. If you don't work at Amazon's warehouses, but you still drive for them, you're still gamified because you have to go and have this gamification in your driving monitoring system. You might think maybe this is just for people who are lower paid. But actually, you know, if you're a programmer, if you're a manager, you can still have your work gamified. So GitHub, some of you might know it, is basically the biggest website for hosting programming code for programmers to work together. And now they have achievements to recognize people's stages on their coding journey. Some programmers like it, and some programmers find it really manipulative because it sort of encourages them to work more every day. They used to have this feature on GitHub called streaks, and it would go and show how many days in a row that you contributed code. And so people got obsessed with extending their streak. They said, you know, I want to go and like have a 100-day streak, a 200-day streak, a 300-day streak. That includes weekends. It includes holidays. It includes when you're sick. So people would just be going onto the website and like doing some stuff on a weekend just to make that streak longer. And one day they got rid of it. They decided to get rid of the streak feature. And someone did an experiment, and I found that everyone changed their behavior. Loads of people stopped checking in on weekends. They stopped checking in on holidays. They stopped overworking, basically, you know. And that's how gamification, it sounds like it's just a badge. It sounds like it's just a number. For some people, it really does change their behavior in a bad way. I mentioned schools. This is something that I was kind of amazed about when I first heard about it. This is an app called Class Dojo. It's used in 95% of schools in the US. It's used in thousands of schools around the world, in the UK, in Europe. And if you're a teacher, if you're a student, you might have seen this actually. But basically, Class Dojo is an app for teachers to control their classrooms. So part of it, it's just a private social network for teachers to share homework and photos with parents and students. But the other part is a classroom management app. And the idea is you go and set up a grid with all your students as buttons. You can see them here. And you can go and award and deduct points to children during lessons in real time. So you can say -1 point for chattering, -2 points for disruptive, -1 point for sleeping, all these things. And this is really popular. It's really, really popular. A lot of teachers use this as a way to kind of control their classrooms, and they can say, Sarah, -5 points for being disruptive. Victoria, +10 points. And the more points you have, you can get rewards. If you get less points, then this gets notified to your parent, and your parent will find out. Maybe you think, wow, this is like a really good thing. Like, this is a great way to get kids to behave. Just give them points and deduct points. We've done that before. It's not a new thing. It's just faster now that we have this app that can remember everything and it can tell parents. There's two things that I kind of want to talk about here. One is basically a recommendation from the Class Dojo blog. And it says, it talks about the sound effects. When you give people points or deduct points, there's a sound effect, and they call it a dojo effect, like a really happy noise or a sad noise. And when a teacher says, okay, I'm deducting points from someone, the kids get really scared. They're like, was that me? And they recommend that teachers create a bogus student in your class to award positive and negative points just for strategic implementation of the dojo effect. So basically just kind of cheating, that the teacher's just like, well, let's just pretend that I'm giving some points to some kid to scare my kids into behaving better. Doesn't seem great. Some kids like it. This kid says, I like it because you get rewarded for your good behavior, like a dog does when it gets a treat. It really depends on what you think we should be doing to motivate kids. If you think that a classroom is just kids throwing chairs everywhere, just absolute madness, the only way to control kids is to give them points and deduct points, then maybe Class Dojo is the answer, right? Maybe this is a way to just put some control into things. But I mentioned I used to be a psychologist. And so the idea of trying to change kids' behavior or anyone's behavior just through rewards and punishment, or we call it positive and negative reinforcement, that comes from an idea of behaviorist psychology. So it's just saying we've got an animal and we give it a treat or we give it a shock, and that's how we train people to do things. Right? That's what all of this gamification I've been talking about, almost all of it, does. It's not trying to make learning more fun. It's just giving people an advanced form of a treat or a zap. We probably agree, I hope most people realize, that that's not actually what motivates people in the real world. People don't only get motivated because of money or because of rewards or because of punishment. We have a much richer idea of why people do things. Some people do them because they're good at it. Some people do it because they want to do things for their friends or because it's meaningful. There's other ideas of motivation, like self-determination theory, that explain why people are motivated to do things. I do things not because people give me a reward, but because it's important to me. And so the thing that really concerns me about gamification is that it has this really one-dimensional view of human psychology. And it's been baked in because it's easy to do that. It's easy to program that into apps and to the software. When I try and design gamification, I don't try and have these positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement. I just try and make it more fun. I just try and make it more interesting. And I don't want to punish people if they fail. So I want to leave you with some examples of gamification that might be used in more interesting ways, because this has all been pretty depressing. A lot of people, everyone knows about Minecraft now. I'm not going to explain it too much. Minecraft has some educational additions, so you can learn programming and physics and things like that. It's pretty boring. I don't think they're very good. I think the most interesting things that I've seen that Minecraft have taught is something very different. A friend of mine, Clive Thompson, his kids have this shared server on Minecraft where they go and build all the castles together and all their things. And they might spend hours or days building some amazing machine or volcano or whatever. And then someone will come in and just destroy it all. And they get really upset. And so what they ended up doing is they ended up writing a constitution for their server, like a mini democratic agreement saying, well, if you come in and you go and blow up my stuff, then we're allowed to ban you, but maybe we'll just go and do this for, we'll go and give you a warning at first. And he was saying the best thing that Minecraft does is it gets kids to play together and come up with rules on how to play together. And that's a great way for people to understand, pro-social behavior and how to work in a democracy. Another game that I think is really interesting, this is a game called Death Stranding. It's a very strange game where you are basically delivering packages across a kind of post-apocalyptic landscape. And the way this works is you play on your own, but you can see things that other people have left in the game. So you have this, this person is trying to get up this cliff, and they can't, but they come across a ladder that someone else in the game has left there a long time ago. And you can go and send likes to them. You can say, thank you for doing that. The likes don't really get anything. You can't buy anything with the likes. It's just nice to know that you're being rewarded. And this is a way that they built this game to encourage people to work together and do things together. You can design experiences. You can design apps and games to encourage people to work together better. And one of the best examples I've seen recently, and kind of most political, most direct, is this platform called vTaiwan. And so this is developed by the Taiwanese government. And so they're trying to figure out ways of improving debate and arguments online. So, obviously, if you go onto Twitter or X, you go onto Facebook or wherever, people are just shouting at each other, people just disagree. It's not really a great way to bring people together. And so they've used ideas from gamification to basically get people to map out what their opinions are, and they encourage people, they reward people for trying to create opinions where they arrive at consensus. So instead of saying, well, I think X and I think Y, they're saying, look, is there anything where you could agree on this? They're trying to shape this into a kind of game where people are encouraged to create statements where people can agree on things. And it's such a weird thing to think that we could use gamification to try and improve democracy in this way, but I think that's one of the most powerful things that we can do. Games and video games are the dominant art form, the dominant cultural form of the 21st century. It might not seem like it, people don't take it very seriously, but they make more money than Hollywood, than books and movies, than TVs, than music. I think we're only scratching the surface of what games are possible. I hope that people use gamification for better. I hope that this helps you spot gamification in your life so you can choose whether you want to keep it on or off. A lot of this stuff, you can turn off gamification on your phone or your watch. You can choose good examples of gamification. And if you see it in your workplace or your government, you can say, well, I don't really like it, or I disagree, or I want to know more about it. So I hope this has been enlightening and not too scary. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Adrian. It is question time.
You've obviously mentioned some pretty problematic examples of gamification that I think most of us were kind of concerned about, but isn't it the case that gamification is just a channel through which we can implement some kind of problematic existing logics that are already present in our society? So whether or not your employer uses gamification, they will obviously still try to squeeze the most output from you for the same money, and our lives are already built in many ways on this idea that you have to hustle. So when I understand your concern, but when we talk about it, shouldn't we talk about instead these ideas, the underlying ideas that are sometimes oppressive and exploitative, and gamification is just a channel through which we can implement those?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I mean, the fault lies in the companies that implement these things. At the same time, I think that gamification magnifies the things that companies can do. So for example, I mentioned Amazon, right? And they're monitoring you, and they're sort of they're sort of trying to encourage you to work more. This sort of practice by Amazon really predates all the way back to this idea of Taylorism and scientific management about 150 years ago. And the way that worked was that someone would basically watch you with a stopwatch. So they didn't have computers. They just see how many boxes you packed with a stopwatch. And at the end of the day or the end of the week, they would say, okay, you failed or you're rewarded and here's extra money. With technology, we can watch you every single second. So it is the same kind of thing, but it's not the same kind of thing because it can act on a bigger scale and a much more fine-grained scale. Another example, there's a lot of gig economy jobs like Uber, but also food delivery use gamification. And one of the leaders of the food delivery union in the UK talked about how at first she actually really liked the gamification in her app. She was like, wow, this is really like encouraging. It makes it like way more happy to sort of do my first job. And then 6 months later, she's like, the exact same gamification is really depressing. Now, I think the company probably would have been bad even without the gamification, but it is definitely doing something different. And so we need to look at both things. We need to look at how it's implemented, but you also need to look at what is bringing the company to do these things.
Do you think that when we will have more gamification in our everyday life in the future, doing sports, school, or work, we will enjoy classical video games less?
That's a good question. I haven't thought of that. You know, the thing is that most gamification is really not very fun. Like, it looks like it's meant to be fun because it uses these graphics, but it's not actually fun. I think you might actually enjoy it more because these are actually designed to be fun. Here's the thing. If you could make working at Amazon genuinely fun, it wouldn't really be working at Amazon. It'd be just like a game. I don't think it's really possible to turn packing 1,000 identical boxes into a game. Like, as a game designer, you know, that's not how you design a game. Like, if I was trying to make Amazon into a game, I'd be like, let's go and have time limits and weirdly shaped boxes and weird characters and things. You know, we'd only get to that point if the work was a lot more fun. And I'm not sure whether they're doing that.
Do you consider the concept of money and the stock exchange as early examples of gamification?
You know, I think there are parallels. I mean, at some point you could say like everything is gamification and then like it has no meaning anymore. I think there's a really good parallel with some stock trading apps actually. So Robinhood in America, there's a movie about this now called Dumb Money. There's stock trading apps that treat financial trading like a game where you get points and you get sort of confetti and things like that. I think that stock trading does, I mean, you have your money, your balance as a score, and it can get exciting, you know, seeing things go up and down. You can feel like you have skill. And you have a lot of people working together on Reddit as well, you know, or other communities trying to manipulate stock prices. So, you know, if you treat it like a game, then it can feel like a game, for sure.
Please give it up for Adrian Hon, everybody. Thank you so much.